by the Queen's side.
Tolerance is the one essential ingredient of any happy marriage.
Prince Philip was a devoted consort and father.
I am so happy. My future husband is by my side.
He was a fun parent to have around and very conscious of spending time with the children when he could.
Shaping his own legacy through his charity work.
5,000 quid, which will go a long way to help a great many families.
I think we'd better get on with the celebrations now. Thank you very much.
His straight-talking manner.
Do I look ill?
And commitment to his country, embodying the values of the wartime generation. Born in Corfu in 1921, Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark was welcomed into a world of title and privilege. But when he was still a baby, his family were forced to flee their home. A military coup meant it was no longer safe to stay in Greece.
When the family were on board this boat, that the sailors looked at the infant Prince Philip, who was only 18 months old at the time, and decided that the best place for him would be this orange crate from which they fashioned a sort of crib, and there he slept during the journey.
Effectively homeless, they eventually made their way to Paris. While money was tight, it was a happy time for Philip, surrounded by his parents and sisters. It wouldn't last. When he was 8, his mother was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia.
His mother was then tragically confined to what was called in those days an asylum for the mentally disturbed. It was the more tragic because Philip was not told what had happened to his mother. She just vanished from his life.
I mean, it's difficult for me to imagine how on earth he coped with the sort of family life that he had. And I think he hugely valued the family life and people coming together and being there for each other.
With his parents separated, he moved around boarding schools in Britain, eventually settling at Gordonston in Scotland.
It turned him into the entirely reliable person that he was. I mean, he learnt very early that he had to really stand on his own 2 feet.
As soon as he left school, a career in the Navy was calling. While training at Dartmouth Naval College, another chapter of his life would open. During a royal visit, he was asked to escort King George VI, his wife and 2 daughters, including Princess Elizabeth.
I think her heart was lost then. I mean, he was a godlike good-looking.
He must have been about 18, I think. I don't suppose that he fell in love with her. I'm sure he would have very much enjoyed her company and thought she was a rather unusual child for her age. I think it wasn't long before it developed into something rather different.
6 weeks after that visit, Britain would go to war. Philip was first sent to the Indian Ocean and then the Mediterranean, where he'd serve on HMS Valiant. His efforts during the Battle of Cape Matapan against the Italian ships was mentioned in dispatches. Like so many, Elizabeth and Philip would stay in touch during the war by writing letters.
There was quite a lot of correspondence went on, and they probably managed to meet occasionally.
He was a bachelor. Again, remember this is wartime, and you don't know whether you're going to get blown out of the sea the next morning. Adds a certain sort of frisson to the whole of life.
For November the 20th, Lieutenant Mountbatten returns to the Naval Training Centre at
As conflict came to an end, not everyone was happy about Elizabeth's continuing infatuation, most notably her parents.
Queen Elizabeth, I think, wasn't quite sure about this good-looking young man. Also, where was his family? Where'd he gone to school? What was this place, Gordonston? Nobody'd heard of it. Prince Philip had joined the Royal Navy. Very good, mentioned in dispatches. But it's not the Brigade of Guards, is it?
But in 1947, their engagement was announced.
To the famous balcony came the bride and bridegroom.
In the gloom of post-war Britain, the wedding was a cause for celebration. The Duke of Edinburgh and his Duchess soon settled into married life. Their first two children, Charles and then Anne, were born.
He was a fun parent to have around and very conscious of spending time with the children when he could. But the more you've known about him and his life, I think the more impressed and the more proud I become of what not only he achieved as an individual, but how he translated that into the rest of his life. And that is an example which I would hope to be able to follow.
Philip continued to rise through the Navy. He was posted in Malta, where his wife would visit, a chance for them to spend time together as a couple.
They're taking the places of the King and Queen who would have gone but for His Majesty's illness.
In 1952, as they were beginning a tour of the Commonwealth, everything changed.
To the stunned heart of London and to the whole Commonwealth came the tragic news from Sandringham of the passing of a beloved sovereign, King George VI.
Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip were in such a remote place in a hunting lodge in Kenya, it was difficult to contact them.
The word came through. It was given initially to the Duke of Edinburgh. Of course, he immediately went to tell his young wife the news that her father, her much-loved father, had died.
A year later came the coronation. His wife was now queen. He was her consort.
Next, the Duke of Edinburgh, preceding the other royal dukes.
She understood the limitations that he willingly took on in his life as a very masculine man, being always one step behind his wife.
And there was no disguising his obvious pleasure at being back amongst his former shipmates.
With his wife settling into her new role, he was forced to give up his career in the Navy. In a rare interview, he talked about how difficult that decision was to make.
I could perfectly well go on with this, with the career. It didn't seem to, and it would have seemed to me would have been of great value to the Queen when she became Queen eventually, to have somebody who was, in a sense, professionally qualified at something and not just traipsing around.
Outwardly dedicated and seemingly compliant, there was, however, the issue of whether his children would take his name. Windsor won out over Mountbatten.
I don't think she quite realised that it was really going to have a very deep effect on Prince Philip. As he said, I must be the only man in the whole country who's not allowed to pass his name on to his children.
Prince Philip would carve out his own path, travelling across the country and around the world promoting his favoured causes. From British industry,
3 out of every 5 gas turbines flying or on order in the entire Western world are British.
To the environment.
There are exciting opportunities to protect some very significant habitats.
And doing his bit to help young people.
So I wasn't prepared for this. So I think we'd better get on with the celebrations now.
Out of the 800 charities he supported, the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme was one of his biggest achievements.
300,000 young people are doing this award at any one time, and what they're getting is this life-changing experience. The Duke's relationship with young people was actually quite a surprising thing. The way in which he engaged with young people when he met with them was extraordinary to see.
Very active, lots of interest, and constantly encouraged us in all sorts, get involved in all sorts of activities, and that's been, that's the bit that we will always remember.
When his wife needed him for overseas tours, garden parties and the big state occasions, he was for decades a constant by her side.
The main lesson that we've learned is that tolerance is the one essential ingredient of any happy marriage. It may not be quite so important when things are going well, but it is absolutely vital when things get difficult. And you can take it from me that the Queen has the quality of tolerance and abundance.
I think particularly for a woman in a role such as she has, I think it would be a very lonely place to be if she didn't have a life partner the way that she has with Prince Philip. And he's a strong character. He's someone she can lean on. He has his own interests as well as the interests of the Queen as well. He sort of has her back, really.
I don't think he got involved in constitutional issues that he shouldn't have got involved in. But for instance, the Christmas broadcast, which was an ordeal for the Queen. The Duke was probably the most important person who she consulted just on the text and the language.
Out of the public eye, he was also someone his 4 children could turn to.
Lots of different members of the family would always find him a good person, a good sounding board. But it was always done very quietly, and he would never talk to anybody else about his conversations.
The family is very close together, and we do enjoy spending time. School will break up in July, and that would be for me the phony holiday, so we go off and do different things. But my parents really weren't really able to escape until August, and that was always really frustrating because we get to Balmoral in sort of mid-August, and it was great fun. But I was only there for about 2 weeks, and then it was off back to school again.
As one by one his children's marriages failed, the 1990s were some of the most testing years. Amid the scandal and divorce proceedings, there was also a fire at Windsor Castle. In 1997, Princess Diana was killed in a car crash. They were criticised for staying in Scotland, keeping the princes away from London. It was hard for the Duke to see his wife under attack.
Take care of the boys, Mum.
That's what we've been doing.
Sorry?
That's what we've been doing.
I know you did.
It was, in fact, Prince Philip who encouraged Prince William to walk behind his mother's coffin.
But it was clear that William didn't want to walk behind the coffin, just felt it would be difficult. And he said to Prince William, "You may regret this if you don't walk in the procession in years to come. You may regret not having been there." So Prince Philip said, "If I walk, will you walk with me?"
In those difficult years, he had little time for the press.
Are you well, sir?
Well, do I look ill?
In an age of increasing political correctness, Philip at times became as well known for his gaffes as his good work, a reputation he wasn't fond of. An outburst at a Battle of Britain event, just one that made the headlines.
Some of the most famous gaffes, this was probably the 1,000th person he was shaking hands with that week. He could see that they were stuck and they didn't quite know what to say next, and he was trying to jolly them along.
Many of those closest to him would argue he was full of fun, helping his wife to modernise the monarchy, making them more accessible.
Sometimes on really rather stiff occasions, the people would be lined up in a ghastly long semicircle, and the Queen would go one way, the Duke would go the other, and you'd hear gales of laughter coming from the Duke's side, and that made things better on the Queen's side as well.
Duke of Edinburgh always notices the little one who's got a flower that he or she wants to give to the Queen, and there are many, many photographs and footage of him picking the child up, taking it over the barrier, and letting the child go and give the flower to the Queen, and then he always notices things like that.
It was following the Diamond Jubilee pageant that he was forced into hospital with a bladder infection. This was the Queen's milestone, but also a reminder of the public's affection for her husband.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we shout loud enough, he might just hear us in hospital and get...
Around his 90th birthday, he did admit he was slowing down a little.
I mean, can you get Radio 3 on this? Why
not?
I'm sorry.
You're standing down. I can't stand up much.
But it wasn't until he was 96 that he retired from his own programme of royal duties. In retirement, he stayed active, his independent spirit brought into the spotlight when he was involved in a car crash and then spotted driving 48 hours later. Occasionally, in his latter years, he would still appear alongside the Queen for big events and family celebrations. In 2020, he made an unexpected public appearance to hand over one of his longest-standing military patronages in the year that he also marked his 99th birthday. It was his marriage that would place Prince Philip at the centre of national life. As well known for his humour as his charity work, a man with a deep sense of duty to his family, his country, and his Queen.
He has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years. And I and his whole family, and this and many other countries, owe him a debt greater than he would ever claim or we shall ever know.